Hey, this is Johnnie Holes, and you are listening to Out of Character, Episode 4. It was January 2010, and the year had barely turned itself over. It was cold, and I was at work, and I was walking around, and I had this horrible feeling as if I really needed to smoke a cigarette. And I was a heavy smoker at the time. I've quit since, thank God. But when I used to smoke, I would just smoke one after the other. I would sneak out, and then the back and the warehouse, and just it was crazy how much I was smoking. But this was a weird day. I just couldn't get rid of that awful, awful feeling. It was driving me crazy. Luckily, and as usual, somehow I ended up having a doctor's appointment that day. So I waved, got myself through the traffic, and somehow made it to the appointment in time. I remember waiting in the waiting area for a while when my doctor finally called me in, my psychiatrist. So I went into the office and I just said, "Look, before you say anything, I just want you to know that I've got this really weird feeling in my stomach. I feel like I really want to smoke a cigarette and it won't go away." And without a beat, he said, "You're going to the hospital. You don't have a choice. I'm admitting you today. If you decide not to, or if you leave, I'm going to make you go in involuntarily. It's up to you." So basically, I sat there and he prepared. It wasn't really it was very strange. First of all, he was too damn lazy to actually call the hospital. Secondly, he called my dad and my stepmother and they drove over. And I remember going to my car at the time. I was driving this 2003 Audi, which was a complete mess, a nightmare of a car. And I'm just sitting in the car and I'm smoking, and I'm just going, "I can't believe I'm going to the hospital." Like, in my head, it's just kind of repeating over and over again. So finally, my stepmother and my dad make it over there, and we're sitting in his office, and he proceeds to type a letter to the hospital. And he goes, "Okay, well, I think this particular hospital has a mental health facility, so I'll write to them." He goes, "You can go over there now and you just present them this letter." He's like, "I don't have time to call them, so I'm just going to give you this letter and you can present it to them." So he wrote this letter, like a page and a half long or whatever, and I didn't find out what was in the letter until much later, and it was really kind of like a bomb going off. So I make it to the hospital, and it's too late to be admit me into the mental health facility. First, actually, I should mention that we went to the wrong hospital. The hospital that he sent us to didn't have a mental health facility. It was the other hospital. So nervously, I went over there, and they admitted me into the emergency room. And I was in, the emergency room. It wasn't. It was basically a hospital with a mental health facility. So they had me stay in the emergency room overnight for 24 hours. They didn't give me any of my medication. I began withdrawals from Xanax immediately. In previous episode, if you recall, my body had become really used to Xanax to the point where it was just living. It didn't realize the it did. My body was. I can't really explain it. I was addicted to Xanax, but I didn't know I was addicted, and I wasn't abusing it. That's what bothers me the most. I was just taking it as prescribed, and I was taking it as prescribed for 3 years straight. Now, I hope this is some kind of a warning to you folks out there. Xanax is a terrible drug. It might solve your problem for about 4 hours, and then after that, it just doesn't do anything for you. And it stopped working for me. And this is me taking it as prescribed. The withdrawals are a fucking nightmare. Like I said in a previous episode, it's more difficult getting off of heroin, and it's more dangerous. I'm sorry, it's more dangerous getting off of Xanax than it is heroin. You could die, and you can go ahead, Google this, check it out. You can actually die from Xanax withdrawal. It is awful. I remember I became extremely dizzy, extremely nauseous. I couldn't eat. My entire body I could feel pulsating. It was like my heart was in my this sounds extremely strange, it sounds psychotic, but it felt as if my heart was literally pumping inside my brain, and I could feel it just pulsating, and I could feel pins and needles. I was dripping with sweat. I was just pouring with sweat, and I was cold, which was even more of a nightmare. I was freezing, pumping with sweat, heart beating, dizzy, could barely walk, could not eat. This went on for about 2.5 weeks. The doctors didn't believe that I was still experiencing these symptoms after 5 days. They're like, "Oh, well, it should be out of your system by now." I was like, "No, it's not." I was just p it was disgusting. I remember my dad coming to visit me on maybe the 3rd or 4th day, and I'd never in my life fainted. I don't know what that experience is. Well, actually, no, that's not true. I did once, but it wasn't as severe. I was basically talking to my dad, and I'm sitting down, and all I wanted, my brain is just going. I just couldn't focus on the conversation. I was just, I don't think I was even present. So my father got up to leave, and I walked towards him. And in my head, I literally said to myself, "Fall down." And I did. I just dropped to the floor, and I passed out. I'd never passed out before in my life. I didn't know what it was like to pass out. It was like the first time I'd ever fainted. I'm in like my mid 30s at the time. I was like 34, 36. I don't remember. Um, so I'm laying there on the floor, and I think that I'm in the hospital room that I'm staying in with my roommate. For some strange reason, I thought I was in a different room. When I finally came to, I looked around, and there were, doctors just surrounding me. They lifted me up, put me on a gurney, dragged me into another room. Mind you, not didn't drag me, but they rolled me into another room, and they decided to admit me to the hospital because they wanted to make sure I didn't have a heart attack or a seizure. They kept me downstairs and for about 2 or 3 days, if I recall. And I remember the first night vividly because laying in bed. It's really late at night. I could not sleep for the life of me. And one of the doctors came in on his late shift. So I hear him talking to the nurses, talking about me. He looks at my chart and he goes, "Oh, well, great." He's like, "Another waste of insurance money, and well, another waste of government money." The guy feels a little dizzy, he falls down, and they put him in the hospital. That's great. Another waste of money. I heard this, and my heart just dropped. I was like, I can't believe this guy is saying this. He's completely insulting me. He doesn't know that I passed out. He's just basically saying that I got a little dizzy. What does that mean? What, dizzy? And I no, but that doesn't happen. So I'm basically just laying there. I didn't say anything to him, and I wish I kind of did, but I didn't. So I spent those couple of days in the hospital. Nothing was wrong with me. I didn't have a seizure. I didn't have a heart attack. I wouldn't have a heart issue until much later on. So finally, I'd actually considered getting up and just walking out. It was they didn't even have anybody watching me when I was in the second or first floor. I could have just literally just got up and left. I kind of wish that I did. The more I think about it, but I ended up staying. I went back up to the fourth floor, whatever floor it was, and I spent, I guess, another week and a half there. I guess I was there maybe 2.5, 3 weeks, if or maybe it was the longest I've ever stayed in a hospital for a mental issue. I was in the hospital longer for my heart surgery, but this I was in much long. This was the longest period of time I was in. It was coming close to my birthday. We are getting closer and closer to my birthday, which is in February, and I made a promise to myself that I was not going to be in this place during my birthday. So finally, I think I don't even remember when it was. This man walked in, and they had to have the guards by him. Not they had, the orderlies, and he was in this trance, and he was repeating this army chant. I guess he was reliving. He must have had some. I don't know what it was, but he was doing this marching thing, and he was repeating what I guess he learned in the army. The man must have been older than my dad. He must have been in his 80s, and that's the moment where I just clicked, and I was like, I've got to get out of here. I was just like, I'll detox at home. I still felt terrible, but I just couldn't stay. I didn't feel safe. We had I remember there was one morning, it was like 3:30 in the morning, and of course I'm trying to fall asleep. I will say that I had the greatest roommate in my entire life. This guy was such a sweet, 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 gentle soul. His name was Jose. Sweetest man. He was such a nice guy, and I felt so bad for him. He had a very serious drinking problem. He also had bipolar disorder. He was having financial problems. He was disabled. He was just a sweet man, one of those really decent, kind human beings. And I was very fortunate to have him as a roommate. Um, I remember hearing someone at 3:30 in the morning barking as a dog a couple of rooms before us, ahead of us, and it's a female voice, and she's just literally going rough, rough, rough. I'm going, what the hell is that? So I turned to Jose at 3:30 in the morning. I'm like, Jose, are you up? He's like, yeah. I'm like, do you hear that? Is someone barking? He's like, yep. Two of us kind of had a bit of a chuckle, and finally, I guess it's breakfast time. I crawl out of bed, and no, actually, it was lunchtime when I crawled out of bed, and I forced myself to the cafeteria, and I'm sitting there, and it's this really beautiful Asian woman comes and sits in front of me, very young, must have been mid-20s. She sits down, and as if she was a robot, mechanically, as if she was doing some kind of a dance, she took the fork, put it in her food, slowly scooped it up to her mouth, placed the food in her mouth, removed the fork, slowly put the fork down, and spit her food out very slowly, almost methodically, almost like a robot, as if she was programmed to do it. I didn't notice this until I saw the spit coming out of her mouth, and I tried to introduce myself before I saw this incident happen. But obviously, I freaked out. The guys next to me felt the same way. We didn't really say anything. We were just like, holy shit. And we all just got up and moved to another table. It was the strangest thing I think I'd ever seen. Here is a human being acting as if they're some kind of a robot, doing everything methodically. Maybe that she was counting the steps in her head. I have no idea. She didn't say a word to anybody. She just sort of sat there in this weird haze. The next day, I would find out that she basically went outside of her room, disrobed, completely naked, kneeled down, barked like a dog, and began to bleed because she was having her period. She bled all over the floor. She stuck a tissue up in her vagina to prevent, her bleeding, to use it as if it was a tampon. She didn't tell anybody she was having her period, I guess, and she didn't have any of, any sort of product. So she literally just bled all over the place in the middle of the hallway, naked, just standing there barking as a dog. I don't know what was wrong with this woman. I have no idea. I've never seen anything like this before in my life. This, I think, was the sixth or fifth time that I had stayed in a hospital, a mental hospital. And I've seen some people that have had some very serious problems. I'm not going to call them crazy people because I'm just equally, messed up in the head as some of these people are. But this woman, I've never seen anything like this in my life. Um, I remember also coming out of the room and watching her walk in this straight line. Like, there were these big tiles that the floors were tiled. So she walked as if on the lines of each tile carefully, and like a strange square, like she walked in a square basically. That makes any sense. Once again, robotically. Um, there were a few times where she did speak. She did play cards with someone. She would argue with her family constantly. They would get into violent fights. Uh, when they would finally get her to sleep, because it took them forever to get her to sleep, they would have to medicate her. She would go into these crazy, her family would come to visit, and her family would insist on waking her up to see her, so she would see them, which was absolutely insane to disturb her. Um, there was another time, I don't remember what happened, but I think she had passed out and they made us all go back to our rooms. But as we walked back to our rooms, she was like naked. She was completely naked. And I just remember looking at her and they were putting like these things on her to check her heart rate to see if it was pounding. I was just completely, I couldn't believe it. I was shocked to say that it was unbelievable. There were so many people in there that it was like a cartoon. It was like a movie. I mean, like I said, I've been hospitalized many times before, but this was just unbelievable. I'd never seen people like this before in my life. I really didn't feel safe. I just was like, I just realized I can't do this anymore. Now I'm going to tell you a secret that I shouldn't be telling you. And some of you, if you've ever been hospitalized in a mental institution more than once, it's not a very pleasant experience, but I can tell you it's very easy to manipulate and get yourself out of there. Now, I'm probably going to get myself in a lot of trouble by saying that, but unfortunately, it's true. All you basically have to do is, if you're admitted involuntarily, wait, what's the wait? I should be editing this podcast. If you if you voluntarily admit yourself, you're required to write, I think, a 48 or 72-hour letter, and the letter says that you're ready to go home. And for those couple of days, they observe you to make sure you don't do anything stupid, and then you can leave. It's incredibly easy to just get yourself. If you're not suicidal, it's seriously, I couldn't believe it. I mean, all I did was basically say, "Hey, you know what? I feel much better now. The medication's working. The withdrawals are gone. I'm ready to go home." In all honesty, I felt like complete shit. I felt awful. I was still sweating. I was still dizzy. I was actually it was incredibly horny, which was the strangest thing. My sex drive suddenly decided to just come back. It just crawled back in me, and all I wanted to do was have sex. It was strange. I'm going through these horrible withdrawal symptoms, and suddenly my hormones are going crazy. I felt like I was 16. It was insane. So I managed to make myself get home, which was a horrendous experience to say the least. I did kind of quietly detox. I'm not quite sure if I lived with my family at the time, and I'm not exactly sure if they knew what was going on. I'm not sure if I hid it well, but I remember the experience it was at least another week or two. I was able to get out of work for about 12 weeks, which was weird because I was eventually disposed of at the job that I was working at. In some ways, I was kind of grateful that that had happened because I hated that job with every fiber of my being. What had happened was the doctors weren't communicating well with each other. The therapist and the psychiatrist just they weren't communicating, and the therapist would tell me one thing, the psychiatrist would tell me another. At one point, I don't know, this is way getting towards summertime. The therapist turns and goes, "Oh, we were considering hospitalizing you again." And I said, "The psychiatrist never said that to me." So their communication was awful. And my job just, after the 12 weeks, they just got rid of me. I just got this letter in the mail. I don't blame the job for doing so. I mean, but it was just a horrendous experience. Um, I am proud to say it's now 2018. It's been 8 years. I've not touched a Xanax in my entire life. I mean, in the past 8 years. So that's good. But I will tell you, it was a horrendous. I just please, if you learn anything from this podcast, if you're still listening, don't take Xanax. And if you do, and if you need to go off of it, make sure you do it under medical supervision. And now I don't. Once again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not saying that I'm a doctor. Not pretending I'm a doctor. And I'm just speaking from experience. And I'm just please get off that stuff if you're on it. And you'll actually be rewarding yourself when you get off of it, because there is a liberating feeling when you're not tied to the drug. I will tell you that. So I know that sounds weird too, but when you think about it, if you're an addict, you're basically in chains, you know. I have to say my addiction was different than other people's, just because basically I had no idea I was addicted to this stupid drug until going to work one day. But when you learn that you're addicted to something, that's when the chains start to wrap around you, and it's horrendous, you know. So, but I can assure you there's other people in my life that have been addicted to other things as well. There's other people I've been in the hospital with, and they went through it too, and they're doing fine now as well. And that's 8 years. So just believe in yourself. If I know it sounds cheesy, but if you are addicted to something, if you're addicted to anything, just know that you can stop it. It's possible. Believe me. I am one of the worst people on the planet for this kind of stuff. Seriously, my addiction that I haven't gotten over with is food. I am hooked on eating crap. When I get upset, I eat crap. That's just my way of dealing with things. And that's my addiction, and I can't kick it. And I know what it's like. So I can assure you, if you're on some kind of a crazy and insane drug, you can do it. You can get off of it. You have my utmost confidence, whoever you are, if you're still listening. It is an incredibly rewarding. It really is, because you've done it on your own. I mean, yeah, you have people there helping you, but in essence, you've gone through this hard. It's like going through a war. Withdrawal and going and detox is like going through a war. And when you finally get through it, you've won the battle. And yes, the first couple of months after with the withdrawal are a little weird, because you're not taking that drug anymore. You're not feeding the beast, so to speak. But your life is so much more richer, and you do feel much better. Trust me. Anyway, this has been podcast number 4. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed it. Do me a favor, just leave me some comments. If you didn't like the show, if you thought I was babbling, if I started getting incoherent, please just tell me. I need to know. Your honest comments. It's all right. I can take it. Just give us a like, though. That's all we ask for. We, as me and the cat. I don't know, but yeah, seriously. If you any comments, just feel free, leave them below. And thanks for listening. I will be back in episode 5. Wow. Okay. Thanks a lot. Take care.